federal stalking underway by, this is the state, LAPD group stalking in the workplace. Flying directly over. All right, and the timing is what is significant. There are already documented group stalkers. This is terrorism that the LAPD engages in concert with the people of the state that are jointly engaged in federal stalking on the venue of the internet. And I'm going to show you what's going on right now. It's currently 10:41 a.m. What you're also going to pay attention to before I show you, this is federal stalking that they are engaged in. One moment, let me pause the music that's on. The entity is engaging in what is federal stalking on the venue of the internet. It's the simultaneity of conduct where you are recognizing the pattern. This is, again, group stalking, relevant position, and then the federal stalking on the venue of the internet. As I send this email right now through my email, eSpeaker companies, this is relevant to the third-party company that is indeed engaged in what is federal group stalking and monitoring. Speaker companies is not exercising any constitutional rights by any individual owning the company, and I'm referencing third-party group stalker R. Todd Speaker, whose company is the criminal means, the malicious guise under which the state's criminal pattern of conduct remains underway at all times. The entity is engaging in the ongoing criminal pattern of conduct as I'm subject to this state system, not only in the workplace, which this is workplace terrorism, harassment, and federal stalking. You're recognizing what is the simultaneity of conduct. So as I send this email at 10:41 a.m., so the audible activity is created, and this is via the state helicopter. This is pursuant to an ongoing documented pattern where the entity is monitoring you in real time, in relevant position, group stalking you. The entity is also engaged in surveillance on the venue of the internet. And what is significant is that this entity is doing so with third-party group stalkers that are also monitoring online. This is every third party affiliated with speaker companies. In other words, every employee. They are not exercising any constitutional rights. There are no privacy rights being exercised. They're engaged in group stalking under the malicious guise of being employees. And you're going to legally break that down. The company itself is a third party. The employees are third-party group stalkers. And this is workplace terrorism, harassment, and sexual violence as an entity engaged in federal group stalking and monitoring. And that's why you have the same exact pattern. And this ongoing terrorism is occurring as I'm using the communication device inside of my office. This is this computer that I'm sending the email on. And as I send that email with simultaneity, the entity is crossing path in helicopter, engaging in the criminal elements of monitoring. What you're also going to be mindful of is the fact that the entity, let me show you this. The entity and the entity represents the people of the state. So residents that send emails to me, they're engaged in federal surveillance in concert with the state, knowledgeable of any and all information that's crossing my screen, which is in violation of the federal housing laws regarding the private and identifying information of residents that are recipients of Section 8, for example. This government, including the state that is LAPD, that's engaged in federal stalking in violation of Title 18, 22618, subsections 1 and 2, is simultaneously engaged in what is group stalking. That is an additional and separate and distinct grounds of criminal prosecution. And you're talking about what is the ongoing reverberating effects of this corruption that the entity is engaged in. There is currently a third-party group stalker on the grounds. This is Nova Contractors, who are also engaging in what are federal stalking with the state. They're on the grounds inside of 1804 number 4, and this is pursuant to a mode of documentation for what is criminal presence. While they are also engaged in the state's pattern of conduct, and they are here. This is a method of what is systematic presence, by the way, which is in and of itself grounds of federal prison. Just want to point that out. They are inside of apartment number 18044. All of the information that rolls across the screen is subject to massive surveillance while the entity is monitoring, and all of the entity. I mean, every single third-party group stalker that lives here is monitoring. They're group stalking and they're engaged in federal stalking in violation of Title 18. Every third-party minion that just drives onto the property to engage in criminal conduct. Imagine all of that which I've documented. They are all simultaneously engaged in federal stalking in violation of these federal housing laws because the target individual, myself, happens to be a property manager, and I am regularly dealing in the private and identifying information of social security numbers, for example, private identification numbers. And this is going to be the prosecution of the vendors that are also arriving on the property, engaging in the state's criminal system as one entity. So I just want to make sure that you understand the broad context with regard to this federal prosecution. And it is currently 10:45 in the morning, as I've already shown, as you're already well aware of, as I've heavily documented. I want to be clear, it's also relevant to who you are documenting. What did I Specifically I captured the entity group stalking last night. This is the third party that's on video under the light source that's present over this same property after 6 in the evening. Oh no, this is after 4 in the evening, and I went through an extensive discussion, regarding the documentation. She's group stalking with LAPD. She was here last night again. You can look at the impossible light activity just on the ground, the shadow of the car going in opposite directions, going in front of the car, going to the side of the car. She's parked in engineered light. She's present and is group stalking. She's also documented acting with LAPD on video where the entity is sounding helicopter activity as I'm literally documenting her. She's going to federal prison for that. As I am publishing this to my email today, the entity is engaging in what is the communication of a threat to your life. What is the policy? The rule is such that every time you are documenting the people of the state and the entity wants to threaten your life through stalking in a perceptible manner by these corrupt law enforcement agencies, that entity, for example, this third party who's already going to federal prison, is subject to what is increased time. The entity suffers for that because the entity wants to threaten you while you are enforcing your rights against that entity. This is a policy that specifically targets that criminal conduct, that criminal purpose. Okay. It is currently, again, 10:47 a.m. This is a documentation of what is indeed federal stalking on the venue of the internet. So I want you to look at this. This is the entity that is indeed going to what is federal prison for this criminal system. All 59 units are filled with third-party group stalkers who are all at the same time engaging in what are federal violations relevant to what are the HUD housing rules, federal policies regarding the private information, which is under no circumstances to be shared. And the employees of speaker companies are directly engaged in that. They are monitoring. You're talking about an expansive violation of these federal laws as well, because the whole entity, that is the state, that is any and everywhere that I go, everything that's on my communication device being my phone, also accessing it on my laptop, accessing it on this computer, the desktop inside of my office. You're understanding what is the massive violation of these federal housing laws while the entity is simultaneously documented engaging in what is group stalking and federal stalking in violation of Title 18. Okay, so it is currently, again, 10:48 a.m. It is Monday, May 13, 2024. This is documentation of what is federal group stalking and monitoring, and this is all occurring on the watch. This is just another means of what is recognizing what will be civil and criminal prosecution of Todd Speaker and Speaker companies, but the prosecution is that of the state of California. Todd Speaker and Speaker companies represent nothing other than a means of identifying the people of the state. He's just one in particular. This third party happens to be my employer where the state's monitoring me. Speaker companies is a third party. All right. Speaker companies employees are third party group stalkers. Our Todd Speaker is a third party group stalker by virtue of engaging in what is criminal facilitation. Both his business and his property are the means of the state's criminal pattern of conduct, which is how an entity is systematically keeping you under surveillance, where you have third parties arriving on the grounds of the crime scene and the entity's monitoring in concert with them. And you've seen that exhibited where you have third-party group stalkers crossing path under the light source in the engineered light, coexisting with engineered light that's moving across the asphalt. That's an impossible occurrence. It's the well-documented pattern. It is literally the identity, the admission of, first of all, a demon-possessed and then a malicious third-party group stalker who's monitoring. Again, it is currently 10:48 a.m. This is P.O.C.